Welcome to Raving Ryan. I'm your host, Ryan Anastasio. Today I have a very special guest, Republican candidate for governor in 2018, Bob Stefanowski. Mr. Stefanowski, how are you? Thank you for coming on.
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So you're a businessman. You've never served in political office before. You previously served as an executive at GE and as well as the CFO at UBS Investment Bank. Can you tell us what you've done in your business career and some of the challenges you have faced on your path?
Sure. So I grew up in New Haven. I went to the public schools. I started at Price Waterhouse, actually. I'm a CPA. And then spent most of my career at General Electric. I was the turnaround guy. They would send me into the messiest situations possible. So I turned around a bunch of different billion-dollar businesses at GE. At UBS, I was the chief financial officer of the investment bank. I had a $500 billion balance sheet across 35 countries. And I think those experiences helped me in two ways. One is if you think about the state of Connecticut, it is a big, troubled, broken organization. That's exactly what I'm used to doing. There is no other candidate in this race on either side of the aisle, quite honestly, that's run anywhere near an entity the size of the state of Connecticut other than me. And I think that's very, very important. The second thing at UBS is fiscal discipline, budgeting, cutting cost. With where Connecticut is right now, with the budget deficits we have, having that discipline, having the ability to budget and hold people accountable, I think will be very, very important in our next governor.
And how many people did you manage? How many people worked under you?
I had up to about 10,000 people in different divisions that I managed, as I said earlier, across 35 countries. So when you've got people in that many different countries, you got to be able to gain consensus. You have to be able to get people to coalesce around a target, and this governor has shown an incredible ability not to do that. And I think having somebody in office who's a leader and who knows how to get people to work together, it will be a very good thing.
Yeah, the Republicans have nominated a businessman the past two times. Tom Foley ran twice and lost. What do you think makes you different than Tom Foley?
Yeah, well, if you remember the first time around, he came within 1%. And I would argue that people like politicians a lot less than they did 8 years ago, or even less than they did 8 years ago. We did a poll. 90% of the people do not want a politician to replace Dan Malloy. I think the other thing, Ryan, is I've got a very different background. I grew up in New Haven. My parents never went to college. They saved money for me to go to school, graduated from Fairfield University. I don't live in Fairfield County. I'm a business guy. I've earned it. And I'm using that money and contributions across the state to fund my campaign. I'm proud of my success. I'm very pleased that I don't have to take $1.3 million of taxpayer financing to run my campaign. There were two candidates that got that today. That's $20,000 a day between now and the primary. Each one of these candidates is going to use $20,000 a day of taxpayer money to run around and tell you how broken the state is. I'm proud of my success. I'm not going to run from it. More people like you, more people should have the opportunity at a young age to do what I was able to do in this state.
Yeah, but don't you think having the citizens election program opens up more opportunities for people that don't maybe can't self-finance their campaign?
I think there's other ways to do it. We're the only state in the entire nation that provides the kind of financing at the levels that we do to career politicians to run for office. This gubernatorial election is going to cost $15 to $20 million to pick our next governor. Dan Malloy took $8 million to get elected 2 times. I agree with a level playing field, but giving people that kind of money with a blank check is absolutely the essence of hypocrisy. I don't know how they get comfortable doing it.
So will you try to eliminate that if you become governor?
Absolutely. I'm okay with it for the state legislator. Yeah, they're part-time roles, and it's not a ton of money. It's a lot of money, but it's not a ton. But to do it at the governor level, that's why you've got so many candidates. That's why you have all these candidates, because if somebody else is paying for it, why not run? The ability to raise money, which I'm spending a lot of time doing, is a filtering process. And without that filtering process, you're going to have exactly what we had on the Republican side, which is 12 Republican candidates going to a convention.
Yeah, and the main issue that you've talked about is rebuilding the economy here in Connecticut, and your plan involves phasing out the corporate income tax and business entity tax over 2 years, phasing out the income tax over 8 years, and eliminating the gift and estate tax immediately. The income tax accounts for around $9 billion, about half of our revenue. Can you tell us how you think you're going to be able to eliminate these taxes and what your plans are?
So let me take it in phases. First of all, the estate tax is crazy. We're the only state in the union that has a gift tax and an estate tax. That generates less than 1% of the revenue of the state of Connecticut, and it drives about $6 billion of taxable income just to the state of Florida. So we get rid of that tax, our net tax revenues go up. Number two, the corporate tax. When you've got a rate that's higher than your neighbors, Rhode Island and Massachusetts, businesses are not going to move here. We need to create an environment where our regulatory environment is better, our taxes are lower, and that's going to stimulate companies to come here and create jobs. The third one is the income tax, and you make the right point. It is a big part of our budget right now, but we have to start to lower it. That's what's driving people out of this state. We lived perfectly well before 1991, and Lowell Weicker put in that income tax. We were the fastest growing state in the entire nation for 15 years. 25 years since the income tax has been put in, we're the slowest growth, worst road quality, and we've never recovered the jobs that we lost in the Great Recession.
So will you lower it in small increments, like every 2 years?
My plan calls for nothing in the first 2 years. We attack it in the third year. We phase it out over 8 years, and we've got revenue triggers. So we only do it to the extent we can afford to do it. But it's bold. Leadership is about being bold. Leadership is about getting people rallied around something. To try to tinker around with 5 different rates right now is not going to send the message we need to send. We're going to say we're going to eliminate it, we're going to go at it, and we're going to do it over time.
In some other states that don't have an income tax, there's less money spent on education. Will there be any cuts to education because less revenue may be coming in?
We won't have cuts to education when I'm in, but we will have more accountability around it. We give plenty of money to the bigger cities, Bridgeport, New Haven, and we absolutely need to fund education. The problem is we're not having enough accountability on it. It's not tied to outcomes based. There's no pay for performance in some of these cities, and it gets back to running in the corporate sector. If I went to Jack Welch at GE and asked for money for something, he would give it to me, but he'd hold me accountable. In this state, we send it one way and then we forget about it.
The pension plans in Connecticut have been underfunded at some points, and some candidates have suggested maybe eliminating this pension and maybe trying to get a 401k plan. But there's a CBAC agreement that has this current pensions until 2027. Are you going to try to change the pension system if you're elected?
We have to renegotiate CBAC, and if you look at the legalities of it, and I won't bore your listeners with this, there's a way to go at it. We could exercise the sovereign powers of the state. The agreement is under property law, not under constitutional rights, but you need to have a credible threat. I would hope that we could sit down with the unions and figure out a fair compromise. Most of the union members I talk to, Ryan, they know that we're not going to find $100 billion in the next 10 years, and they know their checks are going to start to bounce. But until you've got somebody that has some leadership in that governor's mansion who's going to make them believe there's a new sheriff in town, it's not going to happen. We need to file Hartford for bankruptcy. I hate to say it. We need vibrant cities in this state, but the quickest way to get Hartford back to being a vibrant city is not subsidizing the debt with no workout plan. It's having the tough discussion, restructuring the liabilities, just like Detroit did, and coming out the other end. That's the problem with this governor.
So you're going to have a 401k plan, you think, for pensions?
Absolutely. I'd like to provide an option where they can cash out of the defined benefit plan. No one has a defined benefit plan these days. Those went away in the corporate sector 10 years ago. Give people the opportunity to invest their money, participate in the appreciation of the stock market, lower the cost on the state, and it helps everybody out in the long run.
And do you think that will help you make up for the revenue that will be lost in limiting the state income tax?
That's part of it. The other thing, Ryan, is we've got a $40 billion biannual budget. 30 to 40% of that is still discretionary. It's still variable. We need to go at that hard. When I was the CFO of UBS, I introduced something called zero-based budgeting. I had every department come in, and I would say, I don't care what your budget was last year. I don't care what was in there. Let's assume it's zero. That's a different way of looking at things. We ripped out $1 billion of cost in my first year at UBS as the Chief Financial Officer. We can do the same thing for the state of Connecticut.
The sales tax at 6.35% right now. Will you have to raise that?
Leave it alone. I mean, if we can cut costs. The other part about these tax cuts, people don't realize there's a multiplier effect. You give people more take-home pay. They hopefully save some of that. They spend more of that, creates some more demand for goods and services, brings people back into the state. We need to get our rate down and our tax base larger. That's what my economic plan, endorsed by Art Laffer and reviewed by Larry Kudlow, is going to do for us.
Yeah, and taxes is not the only reason that some businesses such as GE and Alexion are leaving. Some of these businesses, they're moving to Boston, which is a big city, and there's more young people and more of a technology things there.
Sure.
How else do you think you're going to drive in businesses besides eliminating the corporate taxes?
So I've got a council of small businesses, Connecticut small and mid-sized businesses, and there's two other issues that come up. One is the amount of regulation. You try to start a new business in the state, the amount of hoops you have to go through is crazy. We need to streamline that. The other one that quite honestly surprised me is lack of skilled labor. We need the trade schools to work better with the private sector to figure out what are the skill sets the private sector needs and how can the trade schools start to produce that, because not everyone needs to go to a four-year university. These mid-sized companies, which in a lot of cases are subcontractors to places like United Technologies, they need skill sets that they don't have right now. So I think it's lower taxes, lower regulation, better quality workforce.
Yeah, and many towns have complained about their state aid being lowered and more money is being poured into cities. You talked about before about letting Hartford go bankrupt. Do you think that we need to build up our cities to get a place like Boston here?
I think we need to have some tough discussions. The problem with the Hartford bailout is we are rewarding bad behavior. And whenever you do that, that's not a good path to send. They weren't fiscally disciplined. They built a baseball stadium with their money. And then they come to us to ask them to bail out of their problem. We have to hold these towns accountable. Now, most of the towns I've seen in the state, and I've probably been to 100 over the past 6 months, are much better at managing their budget than the state government is. So you got to empower the towns to manage their own budgets, but stop the subsidies, stop the rewarding bad behavior, and hold them accountable to run their own operation.
So will you increase aid to local municipalities such as Woodbridge?
I think every state needs to be looked at. I'm going to evaluate how efficiently each town needs to be evaluated individually. How well are they doing? Are they fiscally disciplined? I don't like unfunded mandates. Let's stop burdening them with stuff that should be dealt with at the state level. Let's have them work their own operations. Most of them much better than the state government doing it.
Yeah, and Connecticut has some of the worst roads and bridges in the country, and Governor Moore has called off many transportation projects, including the Heroes Tunnel here in Woodbridge, because there's just not enough money to pay for these projects. How do you think we're going to be able to pay for these projects if you're elected as governor?
Well, it's not tolls. Tolls is just another tax. You can't trust the government, the current government, to fix the roads with it. We saw it with the gas tax. I fundamentally believe we've got to bring the private sector in. I've worked with private equity firms and infrastructure firms for the last 15 years. I know how to cut a good deal. There are billions of dollars of private capital out there just waiting to invest in public-private partnerships. I don't know why this governor is so reluctant to do it. We certainly don't have the money in the state budget to do it. The money's right there. But we need somebody in the governor's office who knows how to cut a good deal, not get taken advantage of, and I've been doing it for 20 years.
So would you have some roads and bridges privately owned, do you think?
I think you can do things, yes. Privately owned bridges. Airports is another great example. Some states and some other countries have privatized their airports. You lengthen the runway. You improve the concessions. You let the state take part of that revenue stream. So you turn it from being a cost center that's decrepit into a revenue center that's actually upgraded with increased traffic.
And you're from Branford, which is very close to Tweed Airport. Are you in favor of an expansion of the runway there?
I think you got to be very careful with eminent domain. I'm not fully up to speed on it. I think we should be looking at other places.
Sikorsky, you think?
Possibly, but you got to be very careful about taking people's homes away from them. But we do need to upgrade the airports. We need to look at whether the current place is the right place to be or maybe an adjacent place. But we've got to get these transportation hubs built up. It's critical to the state.
Yeah, because Tweed is in the middle of a residential area.
It's a problem. And again, you got to be very careful when you're talking about people's homes. There's plenty of land around. I haven't looked at it in detail. We do need a bigger airport in New Haven. I just don't know sitting here today whether it's an expansion of Tweed or moving it down the road.
A Democratic candidate, Ned Lamont, proposed this week to have only trucker-only tolls. Do you think that's a good idea?
I don't think it's good enough. I think it slows down the traffic. I know you could do some things electronically. I don't think and asking truckers to pay tolls is going to be the full part of the solution.
They already have other fees that they pay.
They do. It may be part of the solution, but I still think it's the private sector, having them come in and help upgrade this stuff.
Yeah, and some Democrats have proposed legalizing recreational marijuana to pay for things. Do you think that's a good idea?
I'm okay with it for medicinal purposes, and this isn't one that I feel massively strongly about, but the results are still out in Colorado. The fatalities related to marijuana are up. You really can't test for impairment yet. Let's give it some time and see how these other states. Part of leadership is focusing on what's important and what can actually drive an operation. Legalizing marijuana right now is not on my top 5 list.
Charlie Baker, the governor of Massachusetts, said he wasn't didn't want to legalize it, but he put it up for referendum. Would you consider that?
I'd leave it alone for now. I just think there's so much noise out there right now to be doing referendums on things that aren't going to move the needle. We need to focus on my economic plan, lower taxes, lower regulations, stimulate business. If we can do that, Ryan, a lot of these other things start to take care of themselves.
If there was, currently there's no roadside test to test for marijuana. If they had that, would you be more in favor of it?
I think we need that before we legalize it, but there's other things I'd want to see as well. I'd want to see more of the studies. I'd want to get the economy moving first. You look at the toll discussion. Yeah, that was a 5-year discussion of tolls. What did that do? It distracted the legislature for months. It distracted the media for months. Meanwhile, our bridges are crumbling. Meanwhile, our taxes are going up. And if you try to focus on too many things, you get distracted. We got to focus which is what's going to drive the dial. And in our state, it's tax reform.
Most candidates they go to the state convention first and try to get 15%. Then they go on to the primary. You were different, and you said you're not going to the convention. You didn't even go to any of the debates. And you petitioned your way onto the ballot, and you're on the ballot. Why did you want to go this way? And do you think that maybe the party doesn't like you right now because of this?
It's the smartest thing I've ever done. Yeah. And I respect the delegates. The delegates did a ton of homework for that convention. They're great people, but that's an insider game. And I'm an outsider. That's resonating with people. People are tired of insiders in this state. And right now, Ryan, I've got a database of 16,000 names of registered Republicans that we're putting into a database that we can go touch over the next 6 to 8 weeks. I'm going to send them all a thank you note. If I had to choose between 16,000 registered Republicans and 150 delegates from Foxwoods Casino, I know what I'd take. That's why I'm where I am in the polls right now, which is leading. That's why I'm getting all this attention right now. So all the people that were saying Bob doesn't know what he's doing are now saying, geez, what an interesting idea what this guy did.
And you have 16,000 signatures. You're probably only going to need around 25,000 to win the primary.
Exactly. In a 5-person primary, it could be that. And I'm more than half of the way there.
And the state party was not too happy with you not participating in the convention or some of the debates. Do you have a good relationship with J.R. Romano and the state party?
The party's been very supportive. I mean, we were at the debate. We had a suite. I had 500 people sign signatures that night. I think the state party is just looking for somebody that can win, which I can, and somebody that can fix this state.
And you had a little back and forth with Tim Herbst today on Twitter, and then he brought up the issue of you not voting for 17 years. Is that true?
I was in London for a long time. I should have filed an absentee ballot. I didn't.
It's hard to do absentee ballots.
I was focused on creating jobs for General Electric, but it's classic politicians, right? Instead of answering the question that I asked, which is why you taking that kind of taxpayer money, there's no answer to the question. It's just a counterattack. I've answered my part of the question. I'd love to see those guys answer theirs.
Yeah, I want to finish up with some personal questions.
Sure.
Do you have any hobbies?
I like to garden. I've got a 15-year-old daughter who's in high school, and we put the garden in every year, and it's nice on a Sunday morning just to get out there with her, and you can see the fruits of your labor, right? Everything else is so intangible in life, but gardening, at the end of the season, you see it.
Yeah. And do you have any favorite sports teams?
I like the Giants. I've loved
Same
the
here.
Giants. My dad actually ran the scoreboard at the Yale Bowl for 30 years. And the Giants played there. You're too young to remember, but they played there for about 5 years, and I can remember going to Giants games, and I've loved them ever since.
Yeah, and I want to finish up. I ask this question to everyone. It kind of gets really well known for its pizza places. Do you have a favorite place in the state?
You know, I like modern. The pizza is good, and there's not a line out the door.
Yes.
I don't like to wait in lines. And the pizza's almost as good as Pepe's, so that would be my. How about you? What do you?
Sally's. Yeah, I like Sally's. Yeah.
It's just tough to get in there.
Yeah. Any local places that you like as well?
There's a couple good spots in Madison, but there's nothing like New Haven. New Haven pizza.
All right, I want to thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for doing this.
I admire what you're doing with this show. It's terrific.
Yeah, and you could follow him on it. You can go on what's your website?
It's bobforgovernor.com. Bob, F-O-R, governor.com.
Yeah, give him a follow on Twitter and Facebook. Go follow me on Facebook and Twitter, Raving Ryan. Go to my website, ravingryan.com. Thank you for watching. Reporting for Raving Ryan, I'm Ryan Anastasio.